Is Australia facing a crisis? Well, if you ask One Nation leader Pauline Hanson, the answer is a big, resounding yes. She's making some pretty serious claims about everything from our national broadcaster to a fuel shortage she says is absolutely crippling the country. So we're about to dive into her arguments, her evidence, and the pretty radical solutions she's proposing, all based on a recent, really fiery interview. It all comes down to this one single powerful claim. Hanson's entire argument about Australia's fuel supply really hinges on this idea: extortion. It's a huge accusation, so let's break down what she actually means by that.
So you might be wondering, how did we even get here? We're going to dig into Hanson's diagnosis of the problem, especially how it's hitting folks in rural areas. And then we'll look at the massive changes she's demanding, not just for our fuel, but for our media too.
All right, first up on her list is a target she's had in her sights for a long time. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the ABC. And let me tell you, her vision for its future is, well, nothing short of dramatic.
Get this, $1.2 billion. That's the number Hanson says Australian taxpayers are forking over every single year to fund the ABC. For her, this figure is the main reason why the current model just isn't working and why it needs a complete and total overhaul.
At the absolute heart of her criticism is this belief right here. Hanson argues that the ABC is completely failing to be fair and balanced, which its own charter says it's supposed to be. She even calls its content propaganda, claiming it just doesn't reflect the taxpayers who are paying for it anymore.
So what's her fix? Well, it's a massive shakeup. She basically wants to pull its public funding and move TV and all the digital stuff to a subscription model, kind of like Netflix. But, and this is a key but, there's one exception. She thinks taxpayer money should still go to rural and regional radio, which she says is actually doing a great job.
But Hanson's criticism doesn't just stop with the media. Oh no, she pivots to something she says is far more immediate: fuel. And she's not framing this as some small inconvenience. She's calling it a full-blown national crisis, one that's hitting people outside the big cities the hardest.
And according to her, the front line of this crisis is crystal clear. She's talking about farmers who can't even harvest their crops, a milk industry struggling to make deliveries, and just regular people who can't afford the fuel to get to their jobs. For Hanson, this is where the pain is really being felt.
Now, this is the central contradiction she keeps coming back to, over and over. The official government line from Energy Minister Chris Bowen is that there's no shortage. But Hanson points to what's happening on the ground, service stations literally running out of fuel, and she's asking, why the huge disconnect?
And this brings us right back to that explosive word she used at the start. She has a very specific theory about who's to blame for this whole mess, and yeah, she's pointing the finger directly at some very big corporations. Okay, so here's her step-by-step breakdown of what she's calling extortion. She claims that these huge fuel companies control the supply and are deliberately holding it back from the smaller, independent service stations. With the cost of a single fuel tanker now at nearly $250,000, she says these little guys just can't afford the upfront cost, and they're being systematically squeezed right out of the market.
So after laying out a problem that sounds that severe, it's probably no surprise that she's calling for some pretty significant government intervention to come in and fix it.
And get this, Hanson also alleges the federal government itself is actually benefiting from this crisis. Her claim? That they are pocketing an extra $300 million a month in tax revenue, purely because of these sky-high fuel prices.
So here they are, her 4 key demands. First, she wants an immediate cut to the fuel excise tax. Second, a government investigation into what she calls price gouging. And third, she wants the government to invoke the Liquid Fuel Emergency Act, a really serious step that would officially declare this a national crisis. Of course, none of this is happening in a vacuum. It's all playing out in a political context. And Hanson connects these policy positions directly to what she sees as a major shift happening in the Australian political landscape. And she's citing recent polling to back it up.
The data she keeps referring to in the interview, it comes from a Sky News Pulse poll. She's holding this up as proof that her message is really starting to resonate with voters who feel like the major parties have just left them behind.
And these are the numbers that she uses to make her case. They show that coalition is way down, languishing at just 19%. But look at her party, One Nation. On a federal level, she says they're closing in on the leading Labour Party, trailing them by just 2 percentage points.
And really, this quote from the interview sums up her party's entire pitch to voters. It's a message of restoration, right? Positioning One Nation as the only party that can get Australia back to the way things supposedly used to be.
So at the end of the day, we're left with this question. From defunding the national broadcaster to using emergency powers over the fuel supply, Pauline Hanson is proposing some truly radical changes. Whether you see these as the bold solutions a nation in crisis desperately needs, or as genuinely dangerous ideas, well, that's the central debate her platform really sparks.